My name is Michael. From the outside, my life was picture perfect. I lived in a charming suburban neighborhood just outside Seattle, in a house with a white picket fence, a Labrador named Max, and, of course, my beautiful wife, Amanda. She was everything a man could want: smart, funny, and effortlessly stunning. For 8 years, we were the couple our friends envied. Or so I thought. It started with the smallest things. Amanda would laugh at jokes on her phone, her fingers darting over the screen with a speed and urgency I hadn't seen before. When I asked, "Who's making you laugh like that?" she'd smile and say, "Oh, just Sarah." Sarah, her best friend, was the perfect alibi. Amanda's nights out with her became more frequent, though Sarah's Instagram often told a different story. I remember the first time I felt the knot in my stomach. Amanda came home late one night, reeking of a cologne I didn't own. Her lips were stained a shade of red she hadn't left the house with, and her excuses, well, they were as thin as tissue paper. "Sorry I'm late, babe," she said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Traffic was insane. Her smile was there, but her eyes gave her away. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started noticing patterns. Her sudden work trips, the new lingerie she hid at the back of her drawer, her muted phone notifications. Amanda had always been spontaneous, but now she was guarded, distant. She didn't even realize I had memorized the way she lied, how she'd bite the inside of her cheek or avoid meeting my eyes. Still, I said nothing. I played my part, the loving, clueless husband. I made her breakfast, sent her goodnight texts when she was working late, and even laughed at her jokes. On the surface, everything looked normal. But inside, I was a volcano, ready to erupt. Late one night, as Amanda lay beside me asleep, I opened her phone. I knew her passcode, her birthday, but I'd never used it before. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages, my stomach twisting with each word. There it was, "I can't wait to see you again," from someone named Jackson. And her response? "Me too. You make me feel alive in ways Michael never could." Alive. I stared at her peaceful face in the dim light, wondering how she could sleep so soundly while my world was falling apart. The betrayal was a knife in my chest, but I didn't wake her. Instead, I made a decision. I wouldn't let her know I knew. Not yet. If she wanted to play games, I'd play along. From that night on, everything changed. I became an actor in my own marriage, hiding my heartbreak behind a carefully constructed mask. But deep down, I was plotting my escape and her reckoning. After that night, everything Amanda did became a clue, a piece of a puzzle I was desperate to complete. The name Jackson echoed in my mind like a haunting melody I couldn't escape. Who was he? How had he stolen my wife's heart, right under my nose? I needed answers, but I knew I couldn't afford to tip her off. She was clever, always one step ahead in conversations, always able to charm her way out of suspicion. So, I became a shadow observing her every move. The next morning, Amanda was unusually cheerful. She kissed me on the cheek and hummed as she made coffee, like she hadn't just shattered my trust the night before. "What's got you in such a good mood?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Oh, nothing," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just a good night's sleep, I guess." It took everything in me not to react. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I started gathering evidence. I looked for patterns in her behavior. The days she came home late, the excuses she gave, even the clothes she wore. Her wardrobe had changed subtly. Tighter dresses, higher heels, bold lipstick. It wasn't the Amanda I knew. One evening, while she was in the shower, I went through her purse. My heart pounded as I rifled through her things, terrified she might catch me. Among the usual items, makeup, gum, her wallet, I found a receipt from a high-end restaurant downtown. A romantic place, the kind we hadn't been to in years. The date on the receipt matched one of her girls' nights. But that wasn't all. Scribbled on the back of the receipt was a phone number. I took a photo of it and quickly put everything back in place. My hands were shaking, my mind racing. Was this Jackson's number? The next day, I called in sick to work. Amanda had already left for one of her meetings, so I had the house to myself. I dialed the number, my heart hammering in my chest. "Hello?" A man's voice answered. I froze for a moment, then forced myself to speak. "Hi, is this Jackson?" There was a pause. "Who's asking?" I hung up without answering, my hands clammy. His voice was calm, confident, too confident. I could feel the bile rising in my throat. This was real. He was real. I knew I couldn't face this alone, so I called the one person I trusted completely, Richard. Richard was an old friend, a retired private investigator who had seen more than his fair share of messy situations. When I told him what was happening, he didn't sound surprised. "Michael, you've got to be smart about this," he said. "If she's cheating, you need evidence. Real evidence. Not just receipts and gut feelings. You need something that'll hold up in court if it comes to that." He offered to help me free of charge. "You're my friend," he said, "and no one deserves to go through this alone." With Richard's help, I started tracking Amanda's movements. We installed a GPS tracker on her car and a discreet camera near the front door. Every time she left the house, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation, wondering if this would be the time we caught her in the act. A week later, Richard called me. "I've got something," he said. I met him at his office where he showed me a series of photos. Amanda and Jackson holding hands at a cafe. Amanda and Jackson laughing over drinks at a bar. And finally, Amanda and Jackson entering a hotel together. I stared at the photos, my chest tightening. There was no denying it now. She wasn't just lying to me. She was building a life with someone else. Richard looked at me, his expression serious. "What do you want to do, Michael?" I didn't answer right away. My mind was racing, torn between heartbreak and rage. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. "Let's keep watching," I said finally. "I want to know everything." With Richard's help, I dug deeper into Amanda's secret life. Each day felt like a game of chess, where I had to anticipate her moves while carefully hiding my own. If she noticed even the slightest change in my behavior, everything would fall apart. Amanda continued her charade as the perfect wife, though cracks were beginning to show. She was more distracted during conversations, often staring at her phone with a faint smile. I made a point to act oblivious, asking her about her day and making her favorite dinners. It was sickening but necessary. Meanwhile, Richard's investigation turned up more details about Jackson. His full name was Jackson Harlow, a 38-year-old real estate broker with a flashy Instagram profile and a history of short-lived relationships. He wasn't married, but he had a reputation for dating women who were. "The guy's a serial homewrecker," Richard said grimly. I decided it was time to meet him face to face. Not as myself, of course. I needed to keep my identity hidden. With Richard's help, I created a fake persona. David Ellis, an out-of-town investor looking to expand into Seattle's real estate market. Using a burner phone, I set up a meeting with Jackson. The meeting took place at a trendy downtown coffee shop. Jackson arrived 10 minutes late, oozing confidence in a tailored suit and a cocky smile. He looked like the kind of man who'd never had to deal with consequences in his life. "David, right?" he said, shaking my hand. "Yes," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for meeting me." As we talked, I carefully steered the conversation toward his personal life. Jackson was more than happy to brag, dropping hints about a special woman he'd been seeing. "She's amazing," he said, his grin widening. "Married, though. Complicated situation, but worth it." Every word felt like a punch to the gut, but I kept my composure. "Sounds risky," I said, raising an eyebrow. Jackson shrugged. "Life's too short to play it safe." By the end of the meeting, I had learned enough to confirm my worst fears. Jackson was shameless, arrogant, and completely unaware of who I really was. As I shook his hand and walked away, I felt a cold fury settle over me. Back at home, I reviewed everything Richard and I had collected. Photos, text messages, receipts, and now my personal interaction with Jackson. The evidence was damning, but I wasn't ready to confront Amanda yet. I needed to make sure my next move was flawless. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One evening, Amanda announced that she had to leave town for a business conference. I nodded, feigning indifference, and wished her a safe trip. As soon as she left, I followed her. The GPS tracker showed her car heading toward the city, not the airport. I parked a block away from the hotel where she and Jackson were staying and waited. It didn't take long for them to appear. They walked out of the hotel together, laughing and holding hands. My hands clenched around the steering wheel as I watched them. For a moment, I imagined confronting them right then and there, but I knew it wasn't the right time. Instead, I took photos. Every angle, every touch, every stolen kiss. I wanted her to see what I saw, to feel the weight of her betrayal. When Amanda returned home the next day, she acted as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek and told me the conference had gone well. I smiled back, playing the part of the clueless husband. But inside, I was already planning my next move. I didn't just want her to know I had caught her. I wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions, to understand what it meant to betray someone who had given her everything. In the days following Amanda's business trip, I kept my mask firmly in place. Every kiss, every shared dinner, every whispered, "I love you," felt like poison on my tongue. But I stayed the course. I had to. My patience was the only weapon I had, and I was determined to use it wisely. Amanda, meanwhile, seemed to be glowing. She laughed more, hummed as she cooked, even started planning a weekend getaway for us. Something she hadn't done in years. "We could go to Napa Valley," she said one evening, her eyes sparkling. "Just the two of us. Doesn't that sound nice?" I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. She was playing house with me while living another life with him. "That sounds perfect," I replied, forcing a smile. But beneath her cheerful facade, there were cracks. She was slipping. One evening, while Amanda was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it out of habit, my stomach tightening when I saw Jackson's name flash across the screen. Couldn't resist. I unlocked her phone and opened the message. It was simple, but it made my blood boil. "Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was incredible." I scrolled through their chat history, each message cutting deeper than the last. They talked about everything. How much they missed each other, plans for their next meeting, even jokes at my expense. "He has no idea," Amanda had written during one of their conversations. "Sometimes I feel bad, but honestly, it's like he doesn't even notice. He's so oblivious." Oblivious. I clenched my fists, breathing hard as I set the phone back down. The anger was suffocating, but I couldn't let it consume me. Not yet. The next morning, I decided to test her. While we were having breakfast, I casually mentioned, "I was thinking about taking a day off next week. Maybe I'll swing by your office and take you out to lunch. It's been a while since we've done that." Her reaction was subtle, but I caught it. The flicker of panic in her eyes, the way she hesitated before responding. "Oh, that sounds nice," she said quickly. "But next week's going to be crazy for me. I've got meetings back-to-back all week." I nodded, pretending to accept her excuse. But I knew she was lying. Later that day, Richard called with an update. He had tracked Amanda and Jackson to another hotel, this time in a nearby town. "They're getting bold," he said, almost careless. That evening, while Amanda was out with Sarah, I sat in the quiet of our living room, surrounded by the evidence I'd collected. Photos, text messages, receipts, they painted a picture of a woman I didn't recognize. I thought about confronting her then, laying everything out on the table and demanding answers. But as much as I wanted to see her squirm, I knew it wasn't enough. I didn't just want the truth. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal. The next day, I began putting my plan into action. First, I visited a lawyer. I wanted to understand my options, to ensure I was protected when the truth came out. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Claire, was sympathetic but blunt. "You need to think carefully about what you want," she said. "Do you want to fight for the house, the assets, or do you just want to walk away?" "I want her to know what she's done," I replied. "I want her to understand what she's destroyed." Claire nodded. "Then you'll need to play it smart. Gather as much evidence as you can. And when you're ready to confront her, make sure it's on your terms. Her advice solidified my resolve. Next, I started preparing the house. Slowly, subtly, I began removing traces of myself. Photos, personal belongings, anything that might make her question what was happening. I wanted her to feel the emptiness when the time came. By the end of the week, everything was in place. I had the evidence, the legal support, and a plan that would ensure Amanda could no longer hide behind her lies. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated: how much it would hurt. That night, as Amanda slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how we had gotten here. I had loved her once, more than anything, and now I was counting down the days until I could walk away. The day began like any other, but I knew it would be the last normal day we shared. Amanda was in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, scrolling through her phone with that faint, secretive smile I had come to loathe. The sun streamed through the windows, illuminating her in a way that almost made me forget what she had done. Almost. I sat across from her, pretending to be lost in thought, while inside, I was a storm of emotions. This was it, the final stage of my plan. "You seem quiet this morning," Amanda said, her voice light, almost teasing. "Just a lot on my mind," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. "Work's been stressful." She nodded sympathetically, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Later that day, Amanda left for one of her meetings, and I set everything into motion. I had already packed my essentials: clothes, documents, sentimental items, and stored them in a rented storage unit. I wanted her to come home to the emptiness, to feel the weight of my absence like a physical blow. But the piece de resistance was waiting for her in the living room. On the coffee table, I placed a thick envelope containing everything I had gathered: the photos of her and Jackson, the messages, the receipts. On top of it, I left the signed divorce papers and a simple note: "Amanda, I know everything. Don't bother looking for me. Michael." I spent the afternoon making sure everything was perfect. I removed my wedding ring and left it on the nightstand, a silent symbol of what she had destroyed. I cleared my closet, leaving it barren except for a single hanger. The house, once warm and full of life, now felt cold and hollow. As the evening approached, I sat in my car, parked a few blocks away, waiting for her to return. My heart raced as I imagined her reaction. Would she cry, scream, call Jackson? The thought of her panic brought me a grim sense of satisfaction. Finally, I saw her car pull into the driveway. She stepped out, her expression cheerful, a shopping bag swinging from her arm. I watched as she unlocked the front door and disappeared inside. The next moments felt like an eternity. I imagined her walking into the empty house, calling my name, only to be met with silence. I pictured her finding the envelope, the divorce papers, the evidence of her betrayal laid out like a trial exhibit. Then my phone buzzed. It was Amanda. "Michael," she said, her voice shaky. "What is this? Where are you?" I let the silence stretch, savoring the panic in her tone. "Michael," she said again, louder this time, "we need to talk. This isn't what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I interrupted, my voice cold and steady. "Don't lie to me, Amanda. Not anymore." She stammered, trying to explain, to justify, but I wasn't listening. I had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. "You made your choice," I said finally. "Now you have to live with it." Before she could respond, I hung up and turned off my phone. I sat there for a while, staring out at the darkened street. The weight of what I had done settled over me like a heavy blanket, but beneath the sadness, there was relief. For the first time in months, I felt free. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The life I had built with Amanda was gone, reduced to ashes by her betrayal. But I wasn't broken. I was still standing, ready to start over, even if the road ahead was uncertain. The silence of my new apartment was a stark contrast to the chaos that had consumed my life. It wasn't much, a modest one-bedroom unit on the outskirts of town, but it was mine. No traces of Amanda, no reminders of what I had lost. Just a blank slate waiting for me to rebuild. The first few days were strange. I didn't miss her, not really. What I missed was the idea of her, the woman I thought I had married, the partner I believed I could trust. But that woman didn't exist. She was a ghost, a fabrication, and I had spent years loving a mirage. I kept my phone off for the first week, not wanting to deal with her calls or texts. When I finally turned it back on, there were dozens of messages. Some were frantic, others angry, and a few were heartbreakingly desperate. Michael, please. I need to explain. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Just talk to me. We can fix this. But there was no fixing this. Every message felt like a knife twisting in my chest. But I didn't respond. She had already said enough. Richard called me a few days later, his tone cautious. How are you holding up? I'm fine, I lied. You sure? Because Amanda's been trying to track you down. She even called me, asked if I knew where you were. What did you tell her? That I haven't heard from you, Richard said. But she's persistent. You might want to prepare yourself. I don't think she's going to give up that easily. He was right. Amanda wasn't the type to let go without a fight. I started noticing her car parked near my office, her texts becoming more erratic. Once, she even showed up at the coffee shop I frequented, pretending it was a coincidence. Michael, she said, her voice trembling. We need to talk. I stood there, staring at her, a flood of emotions surging through me. Anger, sadness, exhaustion. There's nothing to talk about, Amanda, I said finally. You made your choice. Now live with it. But it's not what you think, she protested, her eyes welling up with tears. I was confused, Michael. I made a mistake. But I love you. I've always loved you. Her words felt hollow, like an echo in an empty room. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this, I said, my voice cold. You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything we built together. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. It's over, Amanda, I said. You need to move on. I already have. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the photos, the messages, the lies. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, a broken shadow of the woman I once knew. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city lights through the window. The emptiness was suffocating, but it was better than the alternative. At least now I could breathe. But even as I tried to move forward, the ghosts of my past lingered. Amanda's betrayal had left scars, and I wasn't sure if they would ever fully heal. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to cry. Not for her, but for the life we had lost, the dreams that had been shattered. It was a release, a cleansing of the pain that had been festering inside me. And when the tears finally stopped, I felt lighter. Not whole, not yet, but closer. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done looking back. A month passed, and life began to settle into something resembling normalcy. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep my mind occupied. My colleagues noticed the change but didn't pry. They probably assumed I was going through a midlife crisis or some private hardship. In a way, they were right. Every now and then, the memories would resurface. Amanda's smile, her laugh, the way she used to trace her fingers along my arm as we lay in bed. It was as if my brain was punishing me with snapshots of the life we had before everything fell apart. But those moments felt like another lifetime, a story that belonged to someone else. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I spotted Amanda's car parked across the street. She was sitting inside, her face pale and drawn, her fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. I ignored her, walking to my car without a glance in her direction. But as I unlocked the door, I heard her voice. Michael, wait, I sighed, turning to face her. She was standing a few feet away, her eyes rimmed with dark circles, her hair messier than I had ever seen it. She looked fragile, as if the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. What do you want, Amanda? I asked, my tone flat. She hesitated, wringing her hands. I just need to talk to you. Please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I considered walking away, but something in her voice stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity, Or maybe I just wanted to hear her admit the truth one last time. Fine, I said. 5 minutes. We sat in her car, the silence heavy between us. She looked at me, her eyes searching for something. Sympathy, forgiveness, I wasn't sure. I know I don't deserve your time, she began, her voice trembling. And I know I've hurt you in ways I can never take back. But I need you to understand, it wasn't about you. It was about me. I raised an eyebrow. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, she said quickly. But I need to explain. I need you to know why. She told me about how she had felt lost, unfulfilled, trapped in a life that she thought would bring her happiness but didn't. She talked about the pressure to be the perfect wife, the perfect partner, and how she had started to resent the person she had become. It doesn't excuse what I did, she said, tears streaming down her face. But I need you to know, I never stopped loving you. Even when I was with him, Don't. I interrupted, my voice sharp. Don't say that. You don't get to use love as an excuse for what you did. She flinched, her sobs growing louder. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly replaced by anger. I gave you everything, Amanda, I said, my voice rising. And you threw it all away. For what? For some cheap thrill? For a man who doesn't give a damn about you? She didn't respond, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. The car felt suffocating, the air heavy with unspoken words. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. The damage was done. After a long silence, I opened the door and stepped out. Michael, she called after me, her voice desperate. Please don't go. I'll do anything. Just tell me what I can do to fix this. I turned to face her, my expression cold. You can't fix this, Amanda. You can't undo what you've done. And honestly, I don't think you even understand the depth of what you've destroyed. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. But I didn't stay to find out. I walked away, leaving her alone in the darkness. That night I couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in my mind, her tears haunting me like a ghost. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that she was truly sorry. But another part of me, the part that had seen the texts, the photos, the lies, knew better. Regret was a heavy burden, but it wasn't mine to carry. Not anymore. A few days after our encounter in her car, I thought I'd seen the last of Amanda. The conversation had felt like an ending, raw, final, and irreparable. But life, as I was learning, rarely offered clean breaks. It was a Saturday afternoon when the knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened it and saw Richard standing there, I was surprised. He looked uneasy, his usual confident demeanor replaced with something that felt like hesitation. Michael, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. I raised an eyebrow. This sounds serious. It is. He ran a hand through his graying hair, his brow furrowed. It's about Amanda and Jackson. Just hearing their names sent a jolt through me. What about them? Richard hesitated, then pulled out a folder from his bag and handed it to me. I wasn't going to show you this, he said, his voice low, but I think you need to see it. I opened the folder, my hands shaking slightly. Inside were more photos, but these weren't like the ones he'd shown me before. These were candid, grainy, taken from a distance. Amanda and Jackson weren't in hotel lobbies or restaurants this time. They were outside a house. A large, suburban house with a white picket fence and a neatly manicured lawn. What is this? I asked, my voice tight. That, Richard said grimly, is Jackson's house. I stared at him, not understanding. So what? He has a house. What does that have to do with anything? Richard sighed, looking at me with a mixture of pity and frustration. Michael, Amanda isn't just having an affair with Jackson. She's living a second life with him. The words hit me like a freight train. What are you talking about? He's married, Richard continued, to a woman named Lisa. They have 2 kids. Amanda's been integrating herself into their lives. I felt the air leave my lungs. What the hell are you saying, Richard? She's been spending time at his house, pretending to be a family friend. Lisa doesn't know, of course. But Amanda's been around their kids, their neighbors. She's made herself part of their world. I stared at the photos, my mind racing. Amanda laughing in Jackson's yard, playing with a little boy who couldn't have been older than 6. Amanda sitting at a picnic table, smiling as Jackson leaned in close. "She's been lying to all of us," Richard said. "Not just you. Everyone." I dropped the folder onto the coffee table, my hands trembling. This wasn't just betrayal, it was insanity. How could she live 2 lives, weaving such an elaborate web of lies without cracking under the pressure? "What do I do with this?" I asked, my voice hollow. "That's up to you," Richard said. "But I thought you should know the full extent of what's going on. You deserved the truth." After he left, I sat in my apartment for hours, staring at the folder. My mind was a hurricane of anger, disbelief, and a strange, sinking sadness. Amanda's betrayal ran deeper than I had ever imagined. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had erased me, replaced me with someone else, someone who fit into the fantasy life she was building. The next morning, I made a decision. I drove to Jackson's house, parking a few houses down. I watched from a distance as Amanda stepped out onto the porch, carrying a tray of lemonade. Jackson came out a moment later, laughing as he took the tray from her. It was surreal, like watching a twisted version of a home movie. This wasn't my wife. This wasn't the woman I had married. I took out my phone and snapped a few photos, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. These weren't for revenge or leverage. They were for me, proof that I wasn't imagining this, that it was all real. As I drove away, I realized something. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt empty. Amanda had taken everything from me. My trust, my love, my sense of stability, and given it to someone else. But she hadn't destroyed me. Not completely. That evening, I sat down with the folder Richard had given me and began drafting a letter. Not to Amanda, but to Lisa, Jackson's wife. She deserved to know the truth just like I had. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a strange sense of closure. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. Amanda had built a house of cards, and now it was time to watch it fall. The letter to Lisa was short and direct. I didn't include every sordid detail, just enough to expose the truth. I mailed it anonymously, leaving out my name, but I made sure the evidence was undeniable. Photos of Amanda with Jackson, times and dates, and even a few screenshots of their messages that Richard had dug up. 2 days later, Richard called me. "Michael, something's happening," he said, his voice tense. "Lisa knows." "What do you mean?" "She confronted Jackson this morning," Richard explained. "There was a huge scene. Neighbors heard everything. Amanda was there, too." I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and dread. "And Lisa kicked Jackson out," Richard said. "And Amanda, well, let's just say her fantasy world came crashing down." I imagined the chaos, the lies unraveling in real time. For the first time, Amanda had to face the consequences of her actions. Not just with me, but with everyone she had deceived. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "You've ruined my life. Are you happy now?" I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. There was nothing left to say. Amanda didn't reach out again after that text. In fact, her presence in my life faded almost completely. No more desperate calls, no more surprise visits. It was as if she had evaporated, leaving behind only the remnants of what we once were. I began to find peace in the silence. It was strange at first, this quiet, empty space that used to be filled with the noise of betrayal. But slowly it became my sanctuary. I started running again, something I hadn't done in years. I rediscovered old hobbies, reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I didn't expect it, but I found a new sense of purpose. It was as if the weight Amanda had placed on me had been lifted, and for the first time in months, I could breathe freely. I never saw her again, not face to face. Occasionally, I would hear snippets of gossip through mutual friends or coworkers. Amanda had packed up and moved to another state trying to start over, but the damage was done. And Jackson? He and Lisa got divorced. The house of cards had fallen, and now they were both left picking up the pieces. Life moved on. Time healed the raw edges of the past, but it never fully erased the scars. I learned to live with them, though, and slowly, I came to realize that I was stronger for having survived it all. I started dating again, cautiously, never expecting to find the same kind of love I once had. But something changed in me. I no longer saw relationships through the lens of betrayal. I was open to possibility, willing to trust again, but this time with my eyes wide open. As for Amanda, I still thought of her sometimes. Not with anger, but with a sense of quiet resignation. I had loved her deeply, but I had also learned that love couldn't survive on lies. A year later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Amanda. Michael, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But I need to apologize. For everything. What I did to you, what I destroyed. I'm so sorry. I hope one day you find the peace I never gave you. Amanda. I read it once, then put it aside. I didn't respond. The apology was too late, the hurt too deep. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. As I closed the door to the past, I opened a new chapter in my life. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long while, I was looking forward to what came next. Sometimes, the people we love will hurt us in ways we can't imagine. But no matter what happens, remember, your worth isn't defined by their actions. It's defined by how you rise, how you move forward, and how you choose to write your own story. If you've experienced betrayal or loss, know that you're not alone. Take the time to heal, and when you're ready, let go of the past. It's your life to live, and you deserve the peace that comes with it. Drop a comment and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced something similar? Let's talk about it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that make you think, reflect, and most importantly, grow.